Argentina has encountered turmoil recently as the currency has been devalued. Interest rates had to be ratcheted up to 40%, and the country became desperate in a short period of time. When a nation needs money, they can always go to the IMF. The IMF will loan any country the money they need. There's always a catch, of course. So what is it this time? Well, you came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to look at the situation in Argentina. Let's begin. Argentina is in talks with the International Monetary Fund to obtain a credit line to help halt a freefall in the nation's currency. If you think that this is beneficial, that this is positive news, as it reads here, well, all you have to do is ask the people of Greece what they think of the IMF. Discussions have been initiated on how we can work together to strengthen the Argentine economy, and these will be pursued in short order. They are ready to act, and you know that they will be making some changes, and those changes we'll talk about more in a moment. The IMF has been known to offer countries flexible lines of credit as a way to reassure markets they are following economic policies by the Washington-based fund. Countries can tap on the credit line at any time. I'm going to show you some details here, show you the history, show you what the IMF is all about, show you countries that have interacted with the IMF previously. So much to talk about today. Let's get on with it. Argentina has had a difficult relationship with the IMF. It defaulted on its debts 17 years ago, although, by the way, I'll show you that in a moment. Although its last IMF loan was paid down in 2006, Argentina severed ties with the Washington-based body. So they've been through this before. Argentina has defaulted 8 times previously, and we are awaiting the 9th time. But now what has happened is that you can see the IMF coming in. Don't worry, we'll save the day. Nothing to worry about here. We'll take care of it. But what goes on behind the scenes isn't understood by the, other nations around Argentina, but in fact, it's oftentimes not understood by those inside the country as well. In a recorded television statement, Mr. Macri said he had initiated discussions. Just a few minutes ago, I spoke with the director, Christine Lagarde, and she confirmed that we would start working on an agreement today. So this is happening as we speak. I'm sure the details will be put out there in a few days, and I will cover it, of course. There's more information in here, but I'd like to get on with the details and the reason I'm bringing this to you. Back in 2001, you can see this press release. IMF approves augmentation of Argentina's standby credit. They go into more of the details. I just wanted to show you the proof right here. Number one, this was in January of 2001. So we're looking at 17 years ago. And also the fact that they measure the loans in SDRs. For those who don't know, this is their own digital currency that doesn't exist. And ultimately, they loan it out in this, which I think it's kind of funny. But anyway, this is the way it works. And I want to show you this specifically because the SDR, many have speculated that this will become the next reserve currency. It may not be necessarily this, but I do think that this is kind of the principle where it's a currency that doesn't exist. It's just in the, IMF's own minds, but it backs the other currencies. In this case here, we're looking at a US $14 billion worth. So it's going to have a value based on the other values, and they're going to all be interconnected with that. People's countries' currencies may not necessarily change at all when they bring in the next monetary system, but you may have something like the IMF's SDR behind the scenes. Okay, just wanted to show you that there. Take a look at this. You can see what has happened to the currency now. Ultimately, this is versus the US dollar, of course. When the IMF said that, okay, we're going to give you money, don't worry about it, it came up, but barely, because nobody knows what's going to happen. The market realizes that, and you can see that they hiked their interest rates to 40%, but what did it do? It just free fall after. You can't fix things overnight. Doesn't work like that. Hiking the rates, they'd have to hike them a lot further than this. And people think that the interest rates that were given out during 1980 was something that was historic and everything, maybe for the US, but not necessarily around the world. You can see that the century bond, the piece of garbage Argentina century bond, due in 2117, I can't even believe that they sell this. Anyway, it's basically just continuing on its tumble here. Who the hell would want to buy this thing? Going back into the pages of history, 2011. This is my statement to you. If you stayed this long into the video, you get to understand where I'm going. The assets Greece needs to sell to get another bailout. So the IMF makes this deal. And they say, sure, you can have the money, no worries. We'll give that to you. But it's going to need to sell its state assets first. Those assets include baseball stadiums, casinos, airplanes, horse racing tracks, and even islands. $71 billion fire sale. State-run industries are also likely to be sold to the private sector. And it's a transfer of wealth from the state, the government, into the private sector. Now, in a way, I could see that that's actually maybe a good thing. But it doesn't work the way that we would hope. It's not as if individuals are given a fair chance to buy some of these assets. It works a little differently. You have friends of people in high places coming in and getting these assets for pennies on the dollar. It's not as if they're, a house down the street being auctioned off for 10% of its value. And of course, you can come in and you can take all your savings. Maybe you and a couple people go in and buy that house, fix it up, and it becomes an asset to you. No, it's an airport, for example. The average person can't afford that. The average millionaire down the street can't afford that. We're talking about elite groups of people coming in and buying up assets. The same exact thing is going to happen in Argentina. If there are any precious assets, if you're in Argentina, if you've been there before, I want you to think of all of these different industries, all of the buildings, all of the assets that are around, okay? They're going to be sold off. And they're going to be sold off for pennies on the dollar. You heard it here, and it isn't something that I've created in my head. Look around and see the examples in history. Greece is the perfect example. If you remember a few years ago, Malaysia refused a bailout from the IMF during the Asian financial crisis. They did so, and it was shocking at the time. But things ultimately could change. Because one minute they could say, we refuse. And the next minute, they go ahead and approve. Just like Greece. And what they did, again, I'll mention this. Greece said, we want the people to choose. We're going to hold a referendum. Do you want a third bailout in your country? They hold this referendum. Everybody votes. Overwhelmingly, the majority said, no, we do not want a bailout. And literally the next day, they came out and said, we are accepting the IMF bailout. The IMF holds the power. The IMF decides if a country will need a bailout or not. It's not an, philanthropic sort of institution. It's a supranational entity, and they make decisions in other countries without the authority of the elected officials. If you think that somehow, some way, all of the countries around the world have fixed elections. There are all puppets put in place. But the country that you live in, wherever that is, somehow is excused from that. You've got something else coming. There is no country on this earth I'm aware of that decides who the leader will be. The rich and powerful within the nation and externally have put that person into place. It's always happened historically, and otherwise, if somehow they escaped the plans that have been going in place for literally thousands of years, where the secret societies, the big institutions, corporations, and the mega rich have been holding the system in place, making sure that it happens all the time. It's going according to plan. But if somehow somebody sneaks through, eventually they have a little accident. That's just the way it goes. Don't go anywhere. Make sure you click on part 2 of this video. I have so much more important information to discuss. See you there.